With the kickoff to the college football season less than a month away, I figured it'd be about time for us to go over what Florida looks like, at least on paper, under new head coach Dan Mullen. The good news is it can't get much worse than it did last year, he says as he knocks every piece of wood and rubs every rabbit foot within sight. Without much further ado, let's get to it. The Gators are coming off an absolutely miserable 4-7 season that saw the mid-year termination of head coach Jim McElwain and embarrassing losses to teams like Missouri, Georgia, and FSU. Florida brings in a new yet familiar head coach in Dan Mullen, who has injected plenty of optimism into the program. Just how successful these Gators will be hinges almost entirely on Coach Mullen's ability to craft an effective offense around the skill set of the immensely talented yet still raw Felipe Franks. Since Mullen is a QB coach and offensive coordinator by trade, this should be one of his most immediate fixes. Let's start off with a rundown of Florida's 2018 schedule. We'll predict their win-loss totals with an explanation for each result. Florida starts off their 2018 schedule with Charleston Southern at home, and it looks like that's going to be a win with little explanation needed. Florida has too many horses on the field for Charleston Southern to keep up. Gators win big. Next up is Kentucky, and I'll pencil in a W here. Kentucky came within inches of knocking off the Gators last season. In Kentucky, this game is at home, and the Gators have just too many weapons on the field, as well as it being too early in the season for UK to establish any serious momentum. The streak continues, Gators win relatively comfortably at home. Next up sees Coach Mack's old program, the Colorado State Rams, coming to Gainesville, and much like the Charleston Southern game, we're going to pen in a W here. Hell, we'll even Sharpie it in. After Colorado State, the Gators head on the road to Knoxville to take on the Tennessee Volunteers. Tennessee has a first-year head coach in Jeremy Pruitt, and coupled with the fact that they lost a lot of their weapons during the Butch Jones era that made these last three meetings so competitive and compelling, Tennessee gets off to a slow start out of the gate historically here, and Mullen gets the nod at the coaching matchup. Expect another close one in Knoxville, but the Gators will grab the W. Florida will then head to Starkville to face Mississippi State with a 4-0 record, and after back-to-back road games for a still relatively young Gator squad, this spells trouble for Florida. Mississippi State will have this one circled on the calendar, and Starkville is a notoriously tough place to play, especially for the Gators historically speaking. Nick Fitzgerald will give an aggressive Gator defense fits. Much like Josh Dobbs has in previous seasons for the Tennessee Volunteers, the Bulldogs simply catch the Gators off guard, possibly looking ahead to the LSU game, and win a squeaker in Stark Vegas. Gators fall to 4-1. After Mississippi State is LSU in Gainesville. The Gators will be up for this one after last season's nail-biter in Gainesville. LSU is breaking in yet another offensive coordinator and a new QB to boot, be it Joe Burrow or Miles Brennan, and the Tigers also have a ton of talent on defense to replace, specifically Arden Key, which will help offensive guru Dan Mullen unleash his multiple schemes upon an unsuspecting LSU football team. The Gators win this one relatively comfortably before the series shifts back to the Bayou. After a brief home stint, the Gators will travel to Vanderbilt, and in what proved to be Florida's last important win of the 2017 season, the Gators played hot potato with the lead against an underrated Vandy squad. Look for Florida to be more locked in for this game than in previous years under Coach Mack, where wins by less than a touchdown had become the norm against what used to be an almost guaranteed W on the schedule. Florida heads to Nashville and takes down Vandy. Coming off a bye week, the Gators will almost certainly be game for the defending SEC champs, and although this will be closer than a lot of Bulldog fans would like, Jake Fromm and a fantastic offensive line will prove to be the difference in Jacksonville, as Georgia ekes out a win and almost certainly wraps up the SEC East in the process. In a continuation of their Revenge Tour 2018, the Gators get the resurgent Tigers as their homecoming opponent. Mizzou has plenty of firepower with dark horse Heisman candidate Drew Lock under center, but the fact that this game will be in the swamp and feature a hungry Gator defense with a year of experience and embarrassment under their belt proves to be the difference in this tilt. Gators win against the Mizzou Tigers. South Carolina has weapons all over the field and a seasoned SEC vet at the helm in Jake Bentley, but much like Mizzou, they'll be facing a much improved Gator defense in the swamp in November. Florida wins this one in a relatively high-scoring affair. Against a team that routinely ranks dead last in the FBS in pretty much every single statistical category, This should be a nice tune-up for the Gators before the FSU showdown. Florida grabs the W against the Idaho Vandals. This one is nearly a toss-up to me, as both teams feature returning starters at quarterback coming off a less than stellar season, and first-year head coaches looking to turn around stagnant programs, but the fact that this game takes place in Doak Campbell, a place Florida has won only once since the turn of the decade, makes me think FSU pulls away late for the victory. Gators fall in Tallahassee. So, if my predictions are correct, the Gators will enjoy a 9-3 season in Dan Mullen's first year as head coach, with a 6-2 record in the SEC, nearly identical to Urban Meyer's inaugural year in 2005. A second-place finish in the SEC East and a 9-win season will probably place the Gators in either the Citrus Bowl or the Outback Bowl on New Year's Day, meaning a 10-win season is not entirely out of the cards for Mullen and company. The two games I had the hardest time predicting were Tennessee and FSU. I was close to making Tennessee a loss, since it's an early road game for a young football team, and I was close to making the FSU game a win, for equal and opposite reasons, seeing as how both teams were relatively similar on paper, but I stuck with what I had. A 9 or 10 win season in Mullen's first year would be fantastic, considering how awful 2017 was, and would show great strides in Florida's program under Coach Mullen. This will give UF plenty of momentum heading into DM's second year as a head coach and recruiter, with his young team adding another season under their belt, and Mullen starting to implement his own players into his system and schemes. Scarlett comes off a year-long suspension for credit card fraud, and at first glance this seems like a detriment. But with 12 months of rest and a year of experience and a new strength and conditioning coach afforded to the O-line, Scarlett will be the beneficiary. He rushed for nearly 900 yards in 2016, even while sharing a crowded backfield, and will look to be the feature back in Mullen's new spread offense. Watch for Scarlett to return to his pre-suspension form. Defensive MVP, David Reese. To be clear here, we're talking about the junior David Reese, not the incoming freshman. In a relatively down year for the Gators defense last fall, Reese still managed to be both an emotional and statistical bright spot, breaking the 100-tackle mark and becoming somewhat of a vocal leader after calling out his teammates after an abysmal performance against Mizzou. With another year of experience under his belt, Reese will look to guide a defense returning nearly all of its starters back to former glory. Breakout star Kadarius Toney. While he had a relatively breakout year as a true frosh, injuries and inconsistencies kept Kadarius Toney from reaching his true potential. With added bulk and a new spread offense at his side, Toney will truly become the X-factor this team has been longing for since the departure of Percy Harvin nearly a decade ago. One need only look at the Kentucky and Tennessee game film from last year to see how brilliant he could be at times. Mullen and offensive coordinator Billy Gonzalez will put Toney all over the field to maximize his touches and success, so look for KDT to possibly grab 500 yards running and receiving this year. Incoming freshman to watch, Jacob Copeland. From Andre DeBose to Antonio Callaway, the P word has been thrown around a lot in the last 10 years of recruiting at Florida. Hell, just listen to me gush about Kadarius Toney mere moments ago. But at the risk of sounding like a broken record, Jacob Copeland is the closest thing Florida has seen to Percy Harvin since the man himself left for the NFL many moons ago. He has the size and speed combo to be an absolute terror both outside and in the slot. It's hard to say just how good he will be given how little I've seen him play, nor how much of the field he will see given the depth at wide receiver, but if he turns out to be even half as good as some people say he is, Florida will be quite pleased. Bold prediction. Felipe Franks, or whomever gets the nod as starting quarterback, will throw for 3,000 yards. On the outside looking in, 3,000 yards from your starter seems like a pretty banal prediction, but for a UF QB it might as well be like climbing Olympus Mons on the planet Mars. The last QB to throw for 3,000 yards was, you guessed it, Tim Tebow during his 2007 Heisman campaign. No one has even come close since then. With Dan Mullen's spread offense and the wide receiver pool the deepest it's been since the Urban Meyer years, there won't be any excuses for whomever starts at quarterback for Florida this fall.